The empty chairs at my wedding were a painful void, a silent testament to the family who disowned me for choosing a struggling artist. 6 months later, a magazine article revealed the truth about my husband, and suddenly, they all wanted back in. The chair, where my mother was supposed to sit, was empty. It was a beautiful, rustic wooden chair, tied with a white satin ribbon and a single perfect gardenia, its scent filling the warm afternoon air. It was a perfect chair for a perfect wedding, a day I had meticulously planned and dreamed of since I was a little girl, and it was empty. So was the one next to it, meant for my father, and the one next to that for my sister, Chloe. The entire front row on the bride's side was a gaping, painful void, a silent testament to their ultimatum. It had all come to a head a month before the wedding. I sat in my parents' pristine beige living room, the one that always smelled faintly of lemon polish and disappointment. My fiancé, Liam, sat beside me, his hand a warm, steady presence on my knee. He was the reason we were there. He was the problem. "A painter, Sarah," my mother said, her voice thin and sharp like a razor blade wrapped in silk. She didn't even look at Liam, just stared at me, her expression a mixture of pity and disgust. "You're throwing your life away for a man who plays with colors for a living. What kind of future is that?" "He's a graphic artist, Mom," I corrected her for what felt like the 100th time. "He's incredibly talented. He designs worlds." "He designs fantasies," my father chimed in, finally looking up from his newspaper. "Fantasies don't pay the mortgage. They don't put food on the table. Your sister is marrying an investment banker. Mark has a 5-year plan. Does your artist have a 5-year plan?" Liam, to his credit, remained calm. He had this quiet, unshakable confidence that drove my family insane. He wasn't loud or flashy. He didn't feel the need to boast about his accomplishments. He just was, and he was mine. "With all due respect, sir," he said, his voice even, "my plan is to make your daughter happy for the rest of her life. The finances will take care of themselves." My sister Chloe let out a delicate, mocking laugh. "How romantic. You can't pay for a mortgage with happiness and paint fumes." She was 2 years older and had always been the golden child, the one who followed the rules, got the straight A's, and secured the appropriate fiancé. The ultimatum was delivered by my mother. "We will not stand by and watch you make the biggest mistake of your life. We will not support this union. If you go through with this wedding, you are on your own. You will not hear from us. We will not be there." She stood up, a clear dismissal. "The choice is yours, Sarah. Him or your family." I chose him. Of course, I chose him. I chose the man who made me feel seen, the man who could make me laugh until I cried with a simple sketch on a napkin, the man whose passion for his art was the most inspiring thing I had ever witnessed. So on my wedding day, as I stood at the back of the aisle, my heart hammered against my ribs, not just with love and anticipation, but with a profound, aching grief. My maid of honor, my best friend Anna, squeezed my hand. "Don't look at the empty chairs," she whispered. "Look at him." And I did. I saw Liam standing at the altar, his eyes finding mine across the crowd. In that moment, the entire world fell away. There were no empty chairs, no disapproving parents, no smug sister. There was only him. He was my future, and to choose him, I had to lose my past. I took a deep breath and walked towards him, towards my new life. The months that followed were a strange mix of blissful happiness and lingering sorrow. We moved into our new home, a lovely modern house nestled in a quiet wooded area, an hour outside the city. It was our sanctuary. Liam set up his studio in a light-filled room overlooking the forest, and I'd often find him there, lost in his work, creating the breathtaking digital landscapes that I adored. We were happy, truly, deeply happy. But the silence from my family was a constant low-level hum of pain in the background of my life. I sent them a wedding photo. I called on my mom's birthday. Nothing. It was as if I had ceased to exist. Then, about 6 months after the wedding, my world tilted on its axis. It was a lazy Sunday morning. I was sipping coffee, scrolling through my phone, when it buzzed with a call from a number I hadn't seen in half a year. Chloe. My finger hovered over the ignore button. I wasn't sure I was ready to hear her voice, dripping with superiority, and I told you so. But a morbid curiosity got the better of me. I answered. Sarah? Her voice was different. Not smug, not condescending. It was breathless, shaky. Chloe? What do you want? I asked, my tone colder than I intended. I just saw an article online in Architectural Prestige magazine. I frowned. Okay, what does that have to do with me? It's about the old Hawthorne estate, she said, her voice barely a whisper. The historic one overlooking the valley, the one nobody's been able to afford for decades. Someone just bought it, Sarah. They did a complete private restoration. The article says the sale price was just over $2 million. A cold knot of dread began to form in my stomach. I knew the house she was talking about. I was sitting in its sun-drenched kitchen. They did a feature on the mysterious new owner, Chloe continued, her voice cracking with disbelief. A reclusive genius in the tech world, the lead designer for a gaming studio that just sold for $500 million. There's a picture, Sarah, a candid shot of him on the terrace. It's him. It's your husband. There was a pause, a sharp intake of breath on her end. Then, the words that would ignite a war. Why didn't you tell us? Why did you lie about who you were marrying? The silence on the other end of the line was thick with unspoken accusations. I could practically hear the gears turning in Chloe's head, recalculating my entire life, reevaluating my worth based on a magazine article. Lie? I finally managed to say, my voice a low, dangerous thing I barely recognized. I didn't lie about anything, Chloe. You never asked. We never asked if your fiancé was secretly a millionaire? She shrieked, the thin veneer of shock replaced by pure, unadulterated fury. You told us he was an artist. You let us believe you were going to be struggling, living in some tiny apartment, eating ramen noodles for the rest of your life. You let us worry. Worry? I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. You weren't worried, Chloe. You were smug. You were thrilled that I was supposedly making a terrible decision while you were marrying a provider. You disowned me. Dad said fantasies don't pay the mortgage. Mom said she wouldn't support our union. You were there. You laughed. You said we couldn't pay for things with paint fumes. Remember? I heard a shuffling sound, and then my mother's voice was on the phone, sharp and demanding. Sarah, this is your mother. Chloe is right. You were deliberately deceptive. You knew how we felt. You knew our concerns were about your financial security. Why would you hide something like this from your own family? The sheer, breathtaking hypocrisy of it all stole my breath for a second. My financial security? You didn't give a damn about my security. You cared about my status. You cared about what you could tell your friends at the country club. Liam's job hasn't changed. He's still the same man he was a month before the wedding. The only thing that's changed is your perception of his bank account. Liam walked into the kitchen then, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He saw the look on my face and his smile faltered. He set the mugs down and wrapped an arm around my waist, a silent, solid pillar of support. We were only thinking of you, Sarah, my mother insisted, her voice softening into a cloying, manipulative purr. A mother always worries, and now, well, we're just so relieved and proud. We're so proud of you both. We should have a proper celebration. We'll come over this weekend for dinner. We'll bring dessert. It wasn't a question. It was a declaration, a reclaiming of territory they had willingly abandoned. They weren't asking for forgiveness. They were acting as if nothing had happened, as if the last 6 months of radio silence, the empty chairs at my wedding, the unanswered calls, were just a minor misunderstanding that could be smoothed over with a casserole and a bottle of expensive wine. No, I said, the word feeling powerful on my tongue. No, you won't. I hung up the phone before she could reply, my hand trembling. I dropped the phone on the counter as if it were on fire. Liam held me, rubbing my back gently. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I knew this would happen eventually. It's why I never talked about it. Talked about what? I asked, looking up at him. We had talked about his work, of course. I knew he was the lead designer for a hugely successful gaming franchise, an indie darling that had exploded into a global phenomenon. I knew he made good money, but I never cared enough to ask for numbers. We had a joint account for bills, and he handled the larger investments. I trusted him. That was enough. The exit, he said. The acquisition. I signed an NDA years ago that was tighter than a drum. I wasn't allowed to discuss the sale of the company until it was finalized and announced publicly. That happened 3 months ago. Until then, on paper, I was just a well-paid graphic artist. The money, the real money, wasn't mine until the deal closed. But Sarah, he said, taking my face in his hands, I didn't want them to know anyway. I saw how they treated you, how they measured your worth by your partner's profession. I wanted you to choose me for me, not for this. He gestured around our beautiful home. I wanted to build a life with you that was ours, a fortress away from their judgment. Tears welled in my eyes. He had been protecting me, protecting us. The silence from my family had hurt, but Liam had filled that silence with so much love and respect that the pain had begun to dull. Now they were trying to tear down our fortress walls. My phone started buzzing incessantly, a string of texts from Chloe. You can't be serious. Mom is crying. How could you be so cruel? From Dad. Sarah, your mother is very upset. Call us back immediately. We need to talk this out as a family. From Mom. I don't know what we did to deserve such a cold-hearted daughter. We love you. We just want to see your new home. Please, darling. I ignored them all. Liam and I spent the rest of the day in a quiet bubble, walking through the woods behind our house, holding hands, reaffirming what we already knew. It was us against the world, and that was okay. We were enough. But they weren't going to give up that easily. I knew my family. Their pride was second only to their desire for status, and the idea of being connected to this level of wealth was something they would fight for, tooth and nail. A week passed in a tense, buzzing silence. I blocked their numbers. I felt a strange sense of peace, a finality. It was truly over. I had my husband, my home, my life. I didn't need them. Then, the following Saturday afternoon, I was curled up on a sofa in our living room, a grand space with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the long, winding driveway. I was reading a book, a cup of tea steaming beside me, when the gentle chime of the gate sensor echoed through the house. We weren't expecting anyone. Liam came out of his studio, a questioning look on his face. We both walked to the window. A sleek black Mercedes, my father's car, was making its way slowly up our drive, crunching over the gravel. It pulled to a stop in front of the grand oak doors. My stomach plummeted. They were here, uninvited, unannounced. The car doors opened. My father stepped out from the driver's side, looking stiff and uncomfortable in a blazer. My sister Chloe and her fiancé Mark got out of the back, their faces a carefully constructed mask of pleasant neutrality. And then my mother emerged from the passenger seat. She was dressed in a ridiculously fancy floral dress, holding a large, ostentatious orchid plant. She smoothed down her dress, looked up at our incredible home, and her face broke into a wide, triumphant smile. Liam squeezed my hand as my mother, beaming a smile that didn't reach her eyes, raised her hand to ring the doorbell of the house they swore they would never set foot in. The doorbell chimed, a melodic three-note sound that seemed to mock the tension coiling in my chest. Liam's grip on my hand tightened. "We don't have to answer it," he said, his voice a low rumble beside my ear. "This is our home. They don't get to just show up and expect a welcome mat." He was right, of course. I could ignore them. I could let them stand on my perfectly manicured doorstep until they gave up and retreated down my long, winding driveway. The thought was tempting, a sweet, satisfying fantasy of righteous retribution. But I knew my mother. She wouldn't just leave. She'd make a scene. She'd lean on the doorbell, call my phone until the voicemail was full, maybe even try to talk her way past the gate security. She saw this not as a trespass, but as a homecoming, a victory lap. "No," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "Let's not hide. This is our life. Let them see it, and then let them leave." I took a deep, steadying breath and walked towards the foyer, Liam a silent, formidable shadow behind me. I opened the heavy oak door. For a moment, we all just stood there, a bizarre tableau on the stone porch. My mother's triumphant smile faltered slightly as she took me in, her eyes flicking from my casual weekend attire to the man standing beside me. Her gaze then swept past us, into the cavernous, sunlit foyer with its sweeping staircase and modern art. The look on her face was a nauseating cocktail of avarice, regret, and something that almost looked like pride. "Sarah, darling," she finally trilled, stepping forward as if to embrace me. I took a half step back, just enough to make her gesture awkward. The orchid plant she was holding wobbled precariously. "We were in the area and thought we'd surprise you. We brought a housewarming gift." She thrust the plant towards me. "We've lived here for 6 months, Mom," I said, my voice flat. I didn't take the plant. "It's a little late for a housewarming." My father cleared his throat, stepping forward. He had the decency to look slightly ashamed, his eyes darting around nervously. "Now, Sarah, your mother just wanted to see the place. We're all very impressed. Liam," he said, extending a hand towards my husband, "congratulations, a remarkable achievement." Liam looked down at my father's hand but didn't take it. "Thank you, Richard," he said, his tone polite but icy. Using my father's first name was a deliberate choice, a subtle severing of any presumed familial connection. A muscle twitched in my father's jaw. It was Chloe who finally broke the standoff, ever the pragmatist. She nudged her fiancé, Mark, forward. "Well, aren't you going to invite us in? We drove all the way out here. Mark was just saying how he's always admired the architecture of this estate." Mark, the investment banker, gave a tight, uncomfortable smile. He looked at Liam with a new, grudging respect that was almost comical. 6 months ago, he'd barely acknowledged Liam's existence. Today, he was practically starstruck. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. "You have 5 minutes," I said, my words clipped. "Say what you came to say." They walked in, their shoes clicking on the polished marble floors. They were like tourists in a museum, gawking at the high ceilings, the expensive furniture, the sheer scale of it all. "My goodness," my mother breathed, running a hand along a marble-topped console table. "It's just breathtaking. Sarah, you have to tell me who your decorator is." "We decorated it ourselves," Liam said calmly, shutting the door behind them. The sound echoed in the vast space, a definitive thud. "Sarah has excellent taste." "Of course she does," my mother gushed, turning her dazzlingly fake smile on me. "She got it from me." I ignored her. 5 minutes, Mom. What do you want?" She finally seemed to realize that this wasn't the warm, tearful reunion she had envisioned. Her smile tightened. "We want to apologize," she said, her voice dripping with practiced sincerity. "We were wrong. We misjudged the situation. We misjudged Liam. We were just worried, and we let our fear get the best of us. We made a terrible mistake, and we've missed you terribly." Chloe nodded eagerly. "We miss you, Sarah. The family isn't the same without you." The words were what I had once longed to hear, but now they sounded hollow, scripted. They weren't sorry for hurting me. They were sorry for missing out. They were apologizing to the mistress of a $2 million mansion, not to the daughter and sister they had abandoned. "You didn't miss me," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "You didn't call on my birthday. You didn't answer when I told you I had the flu. You didn't miss me at Christmas. You missed the idea of me, And now you miss what being associated with me could get you. The only thing that changed was a magazine article. My phone number has been the same for 10 years. My father winced. That's not fair, Sarah. Isn't it? Liam interjected, stepping forward to stand beside me. He was taller than all of them, a physically imposing presence when he wanted to be. You gave my wife an ultimatum. Her family or the man she loves, the struggling artist. You made her choose. She chose. And now you show up uninvited because you discovered the struggling artist has a higher net worth than all of you combined. Tell me, Richard, what part of that isn't fair? The directness of his question left them speechless. Mark shuffled his feet, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. Chloe's face was flushed with anger. My mother looked genuinely shocked, as if it had never occurred to her that her motives could be so transparently transactional. Finally, she seemed to find her voice, turning on me with eyes full of venomous tears. How can you let him speak to your father like that? This is what he's done to you. He's turned you against us. We're your family. Blood is thicker than water. That's not the full quote, Mom, I said, taking a step forward myself. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The grief was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. The full saying is, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. It means the bonds we choose are stronger than the ones we're born into. And I chose him. I chose my friends, who sat in that front row when you wouldn't. The covenant I made is with my husband, the water of the womb. You decided to drain that pool yourselves 6 months ago. I walked to the door and pulled it open. Your 5 minutes are up. My father's face was pale. My mother looked as if I'd slapped her, but it was Chloe who moved first. She marched towards me, her face a mask of fury. You think you're so much better than us now, don't you? Hiding away in your palace. Well, I have something to tell you too. We didn't just come here to apologize. Her voice dropped, laced with a malicious glee. I'm pregnant. She paused, letting the words hang in the air, watching for my reaction. You're going to be an aunt, and Mark and I were hoping that Mom and Dad would help us with a down payment on a new house, a bigger house for the baby. But now that you're, well, so successful, we thought maybe you'd want to help your only sister out, as a way to make it up to us. The audacity of it was so profound, so utterly breathtaking, that for a moment, all I could do was stare at her. Chloe stood there, radiating a toxic blend of entitlement and desperation, using her unborn child as a bargaining chip. She wasn't just asking for a handout, she was demanding reparations, payment for the emotional distress of discovering her estranged sister was wealthy. The silence in the grand foyer was absolute, broken only by the frantic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Then I started to laugh. It wasn't a giggle or a chuckle. It was a deep belly laugh, bubbling up from a place of pure, unadulterated disbelief. It was the laugh of someone who had finally seen the full, pathetic picture. The laugh echoed off the marble in the high ceilings, and with every peal I could see the confusion and fury on their faces deepen. Make it up to you, I finally gasped, wiping a tear from my eye. Make it up to you for what, exactly? For marrying the man I love, for being happy, for not being the charity case you so desperately wanted me to be so you could feel superior. This isn't funny, Sarah, my mother snapped, her voice trembling with rage. Your sister is pregnant. She's bringing the first grandchild into this family, and she is asking for your help. No, Liam said, his voice cutting through the drama like a surgeon's scalpel. He stepped forward, placing a protective arm around my shoulders. His tone was no longer icy. It was devoid of all emotion, a flat, final judgment. She's not asking. She's demanding. She's attempting to leverage a pregnancy to extort money from my wife, after months of treating her like she was dead. This isn't a family discussion. This is a shakedown. He turned his gaze to Mark, who was now sweating profusely. Mark, As an investment banker, let me put this in terms you'll understand. You made a bad investment. You and Chloe bet on the wrong horse. You backed the family that valued status and money over loyalty and love. You thought Sarah was a junk bond and you shorted her. Turns out, she was the IPO of the century. Your portfolio is now worthless. I suggest you cut your losses." Mark paled, unable to meet Liam's gaze. He looked at Chloe, then at my parents, as if seeing for the first time the flawed, toxic system he had married into. I looked at my sister, at the slight curve of her stomach that I should have been thrilled about, but all I felt was a profound sadness. "I would have been the best aunt, Chloe," I said softly, the laughter gone from my voice. "I would have babysat any time. I would have spoiled that baby rotten. I would have thrown you the most beautiful baby shower in this very house. And I would have done it all when I thought we were just two people with normal jobs, living normal lives, because I loved you. The money wouldn't have made me a better aunt. It just would have meant the gifts were bigger." I let that sink in. "But you didn't want a sister. You wanted a stepping stone. You didn't want an aunt for your child. You wanted a benefactor. You stood by and laughed when Mom and Dad gave me their ultimatum. You abandoned me. That baby in your belly deserves better. It deserves a family that isn't built on transactions and resentment. I truly hope you and Mark can provide that, but we will not be a part of it." I walked to the door and held it open wider. The message was unmistakable. There would be no more negotiation. My father, looking utterly defeated, was the first to move. He walked past me without a word, his shoulders slumped. Mark followed, pulling a stunned and furious Chloe by the arm. She tried to wrench free, to get in one last venomous word, but he was firm, dragging her out onto the porch. Only my mother remained. She stood in the center of my foyer, looking small and lost amidst the grandeur she so desperately wanted a piece of. The ostentatious orchid plant was now sitting on the floor where she dropped it, a single perfect petal broken on the marble. "Sarah," she whispered, her eyes pleading, "please don't do this. I'm your mother." "A mother's love is supposed to be unconditional," I said, my voice steady. "Yours came with a price tag, and it's a price I'm no longer willing to pay. Goodbye, Mom." I watched her walk out, her steps slow and heavy. I didn't shut the door until their black Mercedes had cleared the gate at the bottom of the drive, a sleek black Beetle disappearing from my world. Then I finally closed the door. The heavy oak clicked shut, and the silence that filled the house this time was different. It wasn't tense or angry. It was peaceful. It was the sound of a chapter closing, of a battle won, of a fortress secured. Liam wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. We stood there for a long time, just looking around at our home, our sanctuary, the home we had built not with money but with love, trust, and mutual respect, the very things my family had proven they didn't understand. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. I leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart against my back. I thought of the empty chairs at my wedding, a void that had once caused me so much pain. Now I realized they weren't empty. They were filled with possibilities. They represented the space I had made for a new family, a chosen family, a life free from judgment and emotional blackmail. "I am," I said, and I was surprised by how true it was. A deep, cleansing wave of relief washed over me. "I really am." I turned in his arms and kissed him. "Welcome home." He smiled, and in his eyes I saw my future. It was bright, and it was ours, and there were no empty chairs in sight.